Why would you choose black and white over color for your photography? I'll go over the practice, technique, and psychology behind monochrome images all on today's episode of
Ask David Bergman.
Hey there everybody, welcome back. Here I am, as always, answering your photography questions right here on Adorama TV. If you've got a photo question, you know what to do. Just go to askdavidbergman.com, submit that form on the site, and I just might pick your question to answer right here on a future show. Today's question, unfortunately, is another that comes from a very small batch that cut out the sender's name. I'm so sorry to whoever sent this in, but you know who you are, and here it is. I'm considering switching from shooting in color to black and white for my portrait work. What are some key differences to consider when composing and editing black and white portraits? Black and white photography, it's been around for a pretty long time now. It started back when Joseph Nicephore Niepce created the first known photograph in 1826 and continued on with other new technologies like the daguerreotype. Back then, monochrome images were the only way to capture light and shadow. Color photography began emerging in the late 19th century with breakthroughs like the autochrome Lumiere in 1907 and Kodachrome film in 1935, eventually making color accessible to everyone. Today, we kind of take it for granted as literally billions of photographs are created every single day. That's billions with a B. The vast majority of those, of course, are in color. However, stripping away that color can help create images that are powerful, dramatic, and timeless. There's a reason that legendary portrait photographers like Richard Avedon and Irving Penn used black and white to boil their portraits down to the essentials, focusing entirely on the subject's personality and expression. Now, of course, any discussion of black and white photography also has to include Ansel Adams. You probably know some of the incredible landscape photos that he created. Adams once said, "I can get a far greater sense of color through a well-planned and executed black and white image than I've ever achieved with color photography." Adams believed that color could be a distraction, and by removing it, he was able to direct the viewer's attention to light, texture, and emotion, elements that are universal and a bit harder to manipulate with flashy colors. Now, I'll personally choose black and white when the color in an image just doesn't add anything to the photo. I've often said that everything should be in your photograph for a reason, and if the color isn't helping, get rid of it. I made this image on a nasty rainy day in Portland, Oregon. Believe it or not, this is in color. Even with contrast up and clarity added, it's still super flat and dull. Now, there are some very subtle browns and greens in there, but they're just not important to the final photograph. By converting to black and white, it adds more contrast and even pulls out some of the detail from behind those clouds. This image now feels more powerful and artistic, and I'd be more inclined to print and frame it, while the color version just isn't very inspiring. Now, of course, there's no right or wrong here, but when it comes to portraits, color can be used to add a mood, like in the toning of this picture of Brogan. I bet if someone sees this in 50 or 100 years, they'll probably have an idea of what time period it's from. Black and white, however, is timeless and classic. Taking away the color that might have dated the photo leaves me with something that could be from almost any time. Okay, so let's talk about how to actually create black and white images. Of course, if you're shooting film, you could just use black and white film. In the days before digital, when I was processing myself, it was less expensive and a bit easier to develop and print black and white. Now, I'm not sure how it is today. My guess is that costs have gone up because it's kind of hip to shoot black and white, and fewer labs still have the equipment to deal with it. But most of us are digital now. I personally prefer to shoot in color and then convert to black and white in post because it gives me more control over the process. As you'll see, there are a lot of ways to convert from color, and it can radically change the look of your final image. Now, if it helps you to see black and white when you're actually shooting, most cameras have built-in modes that let you convert in camera, especially mirrorless bodies that you can see as you're shooting. Canon calls these picture styles, and the monochrome setting has some options like sharpness, contrast, and filters, which I'll talk about in a minute. Now, I always shoot RAW files, so I get the best of both worlds. I can get a rough idea of what the black and white image is going to look like while I'm shooting. But since RAW saves all of the color data as well, I can still do a more careful conversion on the computer after the fact. If you only shoot JPEGs, you're pretty much stuck with what you did when you shot it. Now, as for the conversion itself, all RAW processor programs like Photoshop, Lightroom, and Capture One, those are going to give you the option to switch to black and white. In Photoshop, you could just click on that grayscale button and call it a day. But that's not always the best way to do it. Instead, what you want to do is look for the black and white adjustment settings. That brings up a dialog box starting with color filters like we saw in Canon's picture styles. It might seem kind of weird that there would be color settings on a black and white conversion, but what that does is open up a lot of cool options for us. In the film days, you could put a physical filter over your lens while shooting, and it would have an effect on how your black and white images would look. Do you remember your color wheel back when you studied color theory, which of course you did? Well, when you shoot through a filter, it lightens anything that's the same color or close to that color, and it darkens the colors on the opposite side of the color wheel. If you're shooting black and white film and have a red filter over your lens, it's going to lighten up anything that has warmer tones like reds and orange. At the same time, it's going to darken those greens and blues since those colors don't get through that filter quite as easily. Now, red filters are often used in black and white landscape photography because they make blue skies darker, contrasty, and dramatic, especially when there are puffy white clouds in the sky. If you used a green filter, for example, it would make trees and foliage lighter. So now we have these options in the computer, which of course means you can play around as much as you want and see what look you like best. For portraits, reds and yellows are going to lighten skin tones if that's what you want to do. When doing this in Photoshop, you can also click in the image to select that color and then drag left or right to lighten or darken. Now, besides the filters, the other thing you can do here is tint your entire image. So if you want that old-fashioned sepia look, this is the place to do it. Another way to convert to black and white is to use dedicated software that's made just to do that. I personally love Nik Silver Effects from DxO. The program's been around for a long time and still gets updated pretty often. You've got a bunch of cool presets to start with, and it even has options like film stocks, grain, vignettes, and borders. It comes as part of the Nik collection, and I've been using Silver Effects to personally create all my black and white images for over a decade now. I'll put a link down below if you want to check that out. Now, when deciding between black and white or color for your own work, keep in mind that your choice of lighting has even more of an impact without color. For example, this is an old portrait of a band named Thriving Ivory, and I made it using only small speedlights. That creates hard light with dark shadows, and it makes these guys look pretty tough. Soft light, however, is more smooth and subtle, like in this image I made of Jared Leto and his band 30 Seconds to Mars. Despite the tough poses, there's a softer feeling to this photo. Now, our eyes are naturally drawn to the brightest area of an image first, and color can sometimes muddy that up because you don't immediately see the difference between the bright and the dark tones. Black and white allows me to really control the contrast and draw you right into Lisa's eyes. When you remove the distraction of vibrant color in a portrait, you're forced to really see your subject. You can't really cheat in black and white. Since you see everything more clearly, your composition, lighting, focus, posing, and toning all need to work together to tell a cohesive story. There are no shortcuts, and you can't use color to draw attention away from a weaker part of your image. That challenge is part of what makes black and white photography so rewarding. When everything comes together, the result is an image that sticks with your viewer long after they've seen it. So I hope that gives you all, and the person who sent in that question, something to think about when choosing to shoot color or black and white. I've actually got a challenge for you. Take one of your favorite color photos and convert it to black and white. See if the mood changes and figure out where your eye is drawn to first. That's going to help you to see in black and white and might inspire your next photo shoot. Let me know how it goes down in the comments below. And remember, you can send in your own photography questions anytime by going to askdavidbergman.com. If you like this video, I do appreciate you hitting that like button, and go ahead and subscribe to the Adorama YouTube channel. Click that bell icon to be notified when new videos come out from myself and all the other photo hosts right here on Adorama TV. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you back here next time right here on Ask David Bergman.